Welcome to the Shulamite Podcast, an extension of Shulamite Ministries and Shulamite.com, with weekly interviews and teaching with author and speaker Martha Kilpatrick and hosted by John Enslow. This weekly podcast is a way to stay connected to the ministry. So come experience anointed messages, not giving just another method, but a living impartation.
When we did the recording for the Tape of the Month, John didn't participate in this story, but this time I want to hear some things from him that he went through in the whole process, because he was with it for months. What do you remember about it, John?
Well, it was really cool because I wasn't focused on it. It was like it was being brought up continually to me. And like, I would all of a sudden, boom, I'd have it. And it'd be in my face, and I'd deal with it in prayer, and then I'd, pray for it, and then the burden would go away. And, I didn't know from day to day if it was over, it was done, if I was, if my part had been complete. But, I just kept on waiting and listening.
You were available. That's the deal.
I was available, absolutely.
To God.
Yeah. I was there, and I was available, and I just waited.
And you really weren't involved in the news reports as such, were you?
No, occasionally I would hear something about him, and it sparked prayer, but usually it was just kind of just the Spirit. It was just the Spirit would say something.
And that's what I think is so amazing about that, John. Because the news, if you were watching the news, and I was, because at the time I was knee-deep in my news addiction, Steve Scalise was out of the news in 4 days. He was out of the major media in 4 days, and so was his killer. So if you were relying on the news to prompt you to remember to pray, you would not be praying. Okay? It would not have happened. I know this because I remember saying to myself, it's day 5, and this guy is nowhere to be found, and neither is his psycho shooter. It's like the whole thing, they just wanted to, let's just pretend that never happened. So that's what's amazing to me, because if you had relied on the news, you would not have been in it to win it.
So that's what was cool, is that he would bring it up. The Lord was bringing it up to me and would tell me. And you mentioned, when he took a downturn. And I didn't know, I had never even seen the guy. I didn't know what he looked like. I knew nothing about him. I just knew Steve Scalise, and I had to actually go Google him to find out where he was from and what his congressional district was and who he was. But so then, he made a major downturn, and I knew it in my heart. And my spirit was just so troubled. And so I started searching, actually, to see. I was praying, but then I actually searched online to say, what's happening? It was a day or two later that I found out that, yes, he what is it called? Septis? So he turned septic. So, it literally, his injury, I just knew it. I knew that something with his injury had taken a downturn, and that it put him in kind of a critical condition. And so I just really, 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 that's when I brought it to you the most, is when I was like, this is really bad. This is really bad. And then when I found out that he had gone septic, and his body basically, I think he even had, I thought what was going through my head was MRSA and staph infections and stuff like that, because literally what had happened was the bullet went into his hip, and it shattered the bone, and the bone became almost like shrapnel that went through and sliced through all of the organs, the blood. It was just, externally, when you looked at him, there was no issue. You obviously saw he had been shot, but it was the internal deal, and that's why they had to do so much, because they were saying, what is happening with him? Why is his vitals doing this? What is happening? And it was because literally it was like his own bone became shrapnel inside his body and just cut organs and blood vessels and everything like that, and so he's bleeding out. So they went in and they basically did all the surgery to put him back together, but then some kind of infection turned, and he I was like, whoa, okay. So I really started praying about that.
So what was the end of that siege? I know he had a number of surgeries, just countless surgeries, but he came through that part, didn't he?
Yeah, they everything that they did, they turned everything around, and they addressed. I mean, they gave him top notch. I mean, he had the best doctors, obviously, because they were on it. They were fighting for his life. But I know that the doctors had only so much that they could do. I know that whoever was praying with me for him. And I know that there's been a lot of people, because he testifies of that in his book, how many people had, responded and told him that they were praying for him. You've got all those people praying that say it. What about all the people like me who never told him? So he was covered. He was covered in prayer for whatever reason, and it turned it around. It turned it around, and I prayed all the way until the point that I saw him at an interview, and we shortly after we actually listened, we did the book. It may have been after that. Anyway, I saw an interview with him, and I guess the House Majority Leader. So it was Kevin McCarthy and Scalise, and they were there, and they were talking about something I don't remember, but anyway. And I saw them, and I said, okay. I mean, he had a cane, and and to hear the book, I cried. I cried a lot, because I knew I was like, that's when I was really freaked out. That's when I had urgency. That's what happened. So I actually heard the backstory of what I was praying for, which is really, really neat. It's special. That was special, because, it's one thing to pray and then all of a sudden somebody's better. It's another thing to literally have a blow-by-blow accounting of it, and to see that was the day I was praying.
How did you feel when you read the story and listened about the victory?
Well, I knew God had really done the victory, that it was something that the Lord did, and I knew that Steve was chosen, and Steve was called, and Steve was purposed. There was something about Steve. And, this isn't the first shooting. They had, what was her name? Gifford, who was shot in the head. Gabby Gifford, or whatever it was. She was shot in the head. I didn't have anything for her. There was something about him. I had no idea even what party he was in until I, did some research. I didn't know anything about him. It was just like God was saying, this is who you're praying for. So I did. And reading the testimony of it, I remember you and I were going over to Myrtle Beach to write, and I remember crying. I just cried, and you cried. We both cried. We were listening to it while we were there. We listened to it on the way there, and it was an amazing testimony, an amazing book to hear it, but then to be a part of it and hear it was even better.
I kind of see it as a great, massive organization that God put together of people who knows where. They've got many letters from people who did pray, but as you say, that's who knows what it is. But it's like God can do anything. He can, if he wants prayer for a situation, he can call for it, and it's just a matter of being available. and you were available for a long, long time, really, months and months.
Yeah, it was a charge. It was something I was involved with, kind of continually, and it didn't leave me. It's not like I was on it. It didn't leave me. So that was the big difference. We hope you've enjoyed the Shulamite podcast. For all the latest from Shulamite Ministries, please visit us at Shulamite.com, where you'll find Martha's daily devotions, posts from GetAlongWithGod.com, and the online library of all of Martha's writings. At Shulamite.com, downloading the free Shulamite app is easy, and LivingChristianBooks.com is only a click away. Thank you for joining us on this journey to discover a God worth knowing.